A boy gave the money from his piggy bank to a pregnant homeless woman. Later, his family received an unexpected visitor. The jingling of coins echoed in the small but cozy bedroom. Billy, with his large brown eyes wide and focused, held a pink pig-shaped piggy bank with both hands. His freckled face scrunched in concentration as he shook it, trying to guess how much he had saved up. "Just a little more," he murmured to himself, a hopeful smile playing on his lips. Billy placed the piggy bank back on the shelf, beside a photo of him and his parents at an amusement park. His fingers gently brushed the smooth surface of the pig as he stepped away. Next to the piggy bank, a colorful flyer advertised the release of the newest video game, its bright colors contrasting with the rest of the modest bedroom. The boy grabbed his worn-out backpack, swinging it over his thin shoulders. Before leaving, he cast one last glance at the piggy bank as if making a silent promise. On his way to school, Billy observed everything around him. His eyes captured details that many hurried adults would ignore. A hidden bird's nest in a bush, the curious patterns formed by cracks in the sidewalk, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the corner bakery. As he approached the park across from his school, something caught his attention. On a time-worn bench sat a solitary figure. It was a woman, her swollen belly making it clear she was pregnant. Her disheveled hair fell over her face, partially hiding her tired features. Billy slowed his pace, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. The woman shifted uncomfortably on the bench, using an old bag as an improvised pillow. Her thin coat hardly protected her from the chilly morning wind. Billy's heart tightened. He hesitated, one foot suspended in mid-air for a moment before continuing toward school. But his eyes remained on the woman until he could no longer see her. During class, Billy found himself looking out the window toward the park. His fingers tapped restlessly on the desk, his mind far from the math lessons. The image of the pregnant woman on the bench stayed with him. At recess, while his classmates ran and played, Billy sat alone, nibbling distractedly on his sandwich. His eyes constantly drifted toward the park, where he could still see the woman's silhouette on the same bench. Back in the classroom, Billy opened his notebook to a blank page. Instead of copying words from the board, his fingers traced the outline of a piggy bank. Next to it, he drew a woman sitting on a bench, a question mark hovering over her head. The bell rang, announcing the end of the school day. Billy was the last to leave the room, his steps slow and hesitant. As he passed by the park, he stopped. The woman was still there, now awake, her tired eyes staring into nothingness. Billy felt the weight of the piggy bank in his backpack. His hands grew sweaty as he looked from the woman to the path home. The colorful flyer for the video game flashed in his mind, competing with the image of the lonely, pregnant woman. His feet felt glued to the ground, his heart pounding in his chest. Billy swallowed hard, gripping the strap of his backpack. The decision he was about to make weighed much more than the coins in his piggy bank. A gust of wind blew, causing the woman to huddle deeper into her thin coat. That small movement finally made Billy take a step, not toward home, but toward the park bench. His steps were hesitant but determined. As he approached, he could see more clearly the deep circles under the woman's eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands. Billy stopped a few feet away, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. She raised her eyes, meeting his. For a moment, they remained like that in silence, two strangers connected by a gaze. Billy saw fear in her eyes, but also a spark of something else. Hope, maybe? Slowly, Billy slipped his backpack off his shoulders. The sound of the zipper seemed loud in the park's quiet. His fingers found the familiar shape of the piggy bank. He hesitated for a second, remembering the video game, the hours of fun it would bring. But then he looked again at the woman, at her belly, at the future she carried. With a decisive motion, Billy pulled the piggy bank from his backpack. The weight in his hands felt different now, more meaningful. He took another step toward the woman, who watched him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Billy held out the piggy bank to her, his small hands trembling slightly. He said nothing. The words stuck in his throat, but his eyes, large and sincere, conveyed all that needed to be said. The woman looked from the piggy bank to the boy's face, disbelief giving way to a deep emotion. that made her eyes fill with tears. Slowly, as if fearing the moment might vanish, she reached out to accept the unexpected gift. Their fingers touched briefly as she took the piggy bank, and Billy felt a wave of warmth spread through his chest. The woman hugged the pig against herself as if it were the most precious thing in the world. A shy smile emerged on Billy's lips. Without saying a word, he turned and began walking home. His steps were light, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Behind him, he heard an almost inaudible whisper, "Thank you." Billy did not turn around, but his smile grew wider. As he walked, his thoughts were not on the video game he would not have, but on the difference his small act of kindness might make. The piggy bank was empty now, but his heart had never felt so full. The morning sun had barely risen when Billy woke up, his eyes snapping open as if pulled by an invisible thread. The room was still dark, but his mind was clear, focused on a single mission. He sat up in bed, his bare feet touching the cold floor. His eyes found the piggy bank on the shelf, the pig's silhouette outlined in the dim light. For a moment, he hesitated, the weight of his decision pressing on his small shoulders. With silent steps, Billy approached the shelf. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the piggy bank. The clink of coins inside sounded deafening in the morning silence. Billy took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they held a determination that hadn't been there before. With a swift movement, as if afraid to change his mind, Billy lifted the piggy bank above his head. The sound of ceramic shattering against the floor echoed through the bedroom. Billy froze, heart pounding, waiting to hear his parents' footsteps, but the house remained silent. Kneeling, he began gathering the scattered coins. Each one represented a dream, an expectation, but now they had a greater purpose. Billy put the coins in the pocket of his pajamas and started getting dressed in a hurry. Opening the drawer to grab a sock, his eyes fell upon the sandwich his mother had prepared for his school lunch. Without hesitation, he took it too. The house was still asleep when Billy slipped out the back door, his heart beating hard in his chest. The cold morning air made him shiver, but he barely noticed. His mind focused on his mission. The streets were almost deserted. Billy walked quickly, almost running, the coins jingling in his pocket with every step. At every corner, he looked back, half expecting to see his parents following him, half fearing someone might stop him. When he reached the park, he slowed down. There she was, on the same bench, curled up against the cold morning air. Billy stopped a few yards away, suddenly nervous. What if she didn't accept his help? What if she got angry at him for interfering? He took a deep breath, remembering the tired look in the woman's eyes the day before. With hesitant steps, he approached the bench. "Hi," he said softly, his voice almost swallowed by the morning breeze. The woman startled, her eyes wide with fear for a moment before focusing on the boy in front of her. Her face softened slightly when she recognized Billy. "Sue, you're the boy from yesterday," she said, her voice hoarse. Billy nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled the coins from his pocket. He held them out to the woman, along with the squashed sandwich. I brought this for you," he stammered, his cheeks flushing. The woman looked from Billy's outstretched hands to his face. Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of emotions playing across her weary features. "I can't accept this," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's too much." Billy took a step forward, determined. "Please," he insisted, "you need it more than I do." The woman hesitated, her gaze shifting between Billy's sincere face and the coins in his hands. Slowly, as if she still couldn't fully believe what was happening, she reached out her hands. Billy poured the coins into her palms, the cold metal contrasting with the warmth of their skin. He placed the sandwich on top, completing his small gift. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice choked with emotion. My name is Jessica." "I'm Billy," he replied, a small smile forming on his lips. Jessica clutched the coins and the sandwich to her chest, as if they were the most precious treasure in the world. A tear rolled silently down her cheek, falling onto the bench. "You're an angel, Billy," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Billy felt his cheeks heat up. "There's no need to thank me," he murmured, kicking a small pebble on the ground. "Just be okay, all right?" Jessica nodded, a weak but genuine smile lighting up her tired face. "I will be. Thanks to you." Billy stayed there for another moment, feeling both proud and embarrassed. Then, with a final shy wave, he turned to leave. As he walked back home, Billy felt a mixture of emotions. His heart was light, filled with a warm feeling he could not name. But as he approached home, a new worry began to grow in his chest. What would his parents say when they found out what he had done? The house was still quiet when Billy slipped in through the back door. He took off his shoes carefully, trying not to make a sound. He went up the stairs on tiptoe, his heart racing at each creak. Back in his room, Billy looked at the shards of the piggy bank still scattered across the floor. The reality of what he had done hit him suddenly. There was no way to hide this from his parents. He sat on the bed, a sense of fear mixing with the satisfaction of having helped Jessica. What if his parents were angry? What if they punished him? But then he remembered Jessica's face, the relief in her eyes when she accepted his help, the weak but genuine smile that lit up her weary face. Billy took a deep breath. No matter what happened, he knew he had done the right thing. Even if his parents didn't understand immediately, even if there were consequences, he had no regrets. With that certainty in his heart, Billy began picking up the pieces of the piggy bank. Each shard he collected was a reminder of what he had sacrificed, but also of the good he had done. When he finished cleaning up, he sat down on the bed again. He could hear the first sounds of movement downstairs. His parents were waking up. Billy closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage. Then, with a determined sigh, he got up. It was time to face the consequences of his choice. As he walked down the stairs, Billy felt a mix of fear and pride. He didn't know how his parents would react, but he knew that, no matter what happened, he had made a difference in someone's life today, and that, he decided, was worth more than any video game or punishment. With that thought in mind, Billy entered the kitchen, ready to tell his story. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen as Billy entered, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might jump out of his chest. Susan, his mother, stood with her back to him, stirring something on the stove. Robert, his father, lowered his newspaper when he saw his son. "Good morning, champ," Robert smiled, but his expression quickly changed as he noticed Billy's tense face. "Everything okay?" Billy opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck in his throat. Susan turned around, spatula in hand, her maternal gaze immediately sensing her son's unease. "Billy? What's wrong, sweetie?" The silence hung for a moment, broken only by the gentle bubbling from the pot on the stove. Billy took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he could. I broke my piggy bank," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Susan and Robert exchanged quick, surprised glances. "Broke it? What do you mean, son?" Robert asked, frowning. Billy felt tears forming at the corners of his eyes, but he pressed on. "I gave all the money to a pregnant lady in the park. She looked like she needed it a lot more than I did." The shock was evident on his parents' faces. Susan let the spatula clatter into the sink with a metallic clang. "Billy, what are you talking about?" "What lady?" The words began pouring out of Billy in a rush, as if a dam had burst. He told them about seeing Jessica in the park, how she seemed cold and hungry, how he decided to help her with his savings. As he spoke, Billy watched his parents' expressions change. The initial surprise gave way to a complex mix of emotions: concern, confusion, and, surprisingly, a glimmer of pride in both of their eyes. When Billy finished, the kitchen fell silent for a few moments. Susan was the first to move, kneeling beside Billy's chair and wrapping him in a tight hug. "Oh, Billy," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. "Your heart is so big." Robert stood up, walking over to them. He placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, what you did was very noble, but also very dangerous. You shouldn't have gone out alone so early." Billy nodded, silent tears running down his cheeks. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I just wanted to help." Susan pulled back a bit, holding Billy's face in her hands. "We understand, sweetie, but next time you want to help someone, please tell us first, okay?" Billy agreed, feeling immense relief that his parents weren't angry. Robert ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "I'm proud of you, champ, but also very worried." "We know nothing about this woman," Susan stood up, a determined look on her face. "We need to find her, make sure she's okay and really needed help." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. Tomorrow morning, before work, we can stop by the park, see if she's still there." Billy felt a wave of relief and excitement. "Fa, can I come along?" His parents exchanged looks, having a silent conversation that only years of marriage allow. Finally, Susan smiled. "Yes, you can. But we're all going together. Understood?" The rest of breakfast was quieter than usual, though the tension of the revelation still lingered. Billy ate his pancakes with less enthusiasm than normal, his mind filled with thoughts of Jessica and what tomorrow would bring. That night, lying in bed, Billy couldn't sleep. His eyes roamed around the room, settling on the empty spot on the shelf where his piggy bank used to be. He didn't regret his decision, but a pang of worry bothered him. What if Jessica wasn't there tomorrow? What if it had all been a mistake? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Susan entered, sitting at the edge of the bed. "Can't sleep, sweetheart." Billy shook his head. Susan smiled gently, running a hand through her son's hair. "You know, Billy, what you did today was very special. Not everyone would have the courage to help a stranger like that." "You're not mad at me?" Billy asked softly. Susan hesitated for a moment. "We're worried, yes, but also very proud. You have a heart of gold, son. We just need to make sure you're safe while you help others." Billy nodded, feeling comforted. "Yeah, Mum, do you think we'll find Jessica tomorrow?" "I hope so, sweetie. And if we do, we'll see how we can really help her, okay?" Billy smiled, feeling the weight of his worries ease slightly. Susan kissed his forehead before leaving him with more hopeful thoughts. In the next room, Susan found Robert still awake, reading in bed. She sat down beside him with a sigh. "He's worried," she whispered. Robert put the book down. "And with good reason. We know nothing about this woman, Sue. What if it's some sort of scam?" Susan frowned. "I don't think so. The way Billy described her, it seems genuine. But you're right, we must be cautious." They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Robert spoke. "You know, as worried as I am, I can't help feeling proud. Our son has a huge heart." Susan smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, he does. I just hope the world doesn't hurt him for it." Robert embraced his wife, both feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. Tomorrow would bring answers, they hoped. But for now, all they could do was wait and marvel at the innocent yet powerful compassion of their son. Dinner passed in unusual silence at the Parker household. Billy pushed the food around on his plate, his mind still filled with thoughts of Jessica and the morning's events. Susan and Robert exchanged occasional worried glances, their own concerns hanging in the air like an invisible cloud. The sudden sound of the doorbell cut through the quiet, making all three jump in their seats. Billy felt a strange chill run down his spine. "Who could it be at this hour?" Susan muttered, frowning. Robert stood up, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "I'll check." Billy watched his father walk toward the front door, a strange feeling twisting in his stomach. He didn't know why, but something felt off. The door creaked open, revealing a large, imposing man. Even from the dining room, Billy could sense his intimidating presence. "Good evening." The man's voice was deep and controlled, but there was an underlying tension that Billy immediately picked up on. "Sorry to bother you so late. My name is Mark. I'm looking for my wife." Robert hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the nature of the visit. "Your wife?" "I'm sorry, but I don't know." Mark interrupted him, his voice gaining a note of urgency. "She's pregnant. She left home yesterday and never returned. I'm very worried." Billy's heart began to race. The description matched Jessica, but something about Mark's voice and the way he carried himself made the boy shrink back instinctively. Susan joined Robert at the door. "Come in, please. Maybe we can help." Billy wanted to shout to tell his parents not to let the man in, but the words stuck in his throat. Mark entered the living room, his eyes sweeping across the space with an intensity that made Billy feel exposed, even though he was partly hidden in the kitchen. When Mark's gaze fell on him, Billy felt as if he was being examined by a predator. "Is this your son?" Mark asked, a forced smile on his lips. Robert nodded, subtly positioning himself between Mark and Billy. "Yes, this is Billy. Son, come here, please." With hesitant steps, Billy approached, feeling small and vulnerable under Mark's scrutinizing stare. "Hello, Billy." Mark crouched down to the boy's eye level, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Have you by any chance seen a pregnant woman around here? Dark hair, green eyes, probably looked a bit lost." Billy's heart pounded. The description perfectly fit Jessica. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Something in his instinct screamed at him not to tell the truth. Susan placed a protective hand on Billy's shoulder. "Sweetie, have you seen anyone like that?" Billy swallowed hard, his eyes shifting between his parents and Mark. I haven't seen anyone like that," he finally managed, surprised by his own lie. Mark stood up, a shadow of disappointment, and something else, anger, flitting across his face. "I see," he said, controlling his voice. "Well, if you do see her, please let me know. I'm really worried about her and our baby." He pulled a card from his pocket, handing it to Robert. "My number is there. Please, don't hesitate to call at any time." Robert took the card, nodding politely. "Of course, we'll do that. I hope you find her soon." As Mark headed for the door, Billy noticed his clenched fists, the knuckles white with tension. Something in the man's posture, the way his eyes narrowed as he took one last look at the family, made Billy tremble. The moment the door closed behind Mark, a collective sigh of relief filled the room. Susan knelt beside Billy, her eyes full of worry. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Billy nodded silently, still feeling the weight of Mark's gaze on him. Robert frowned, looking down at the card in his hand. "There's something strange about that man. I can't explain it, but I know," Susan agreed, hugging Billy protectively. "Billy, are you sure you didn't see the woman he described?" Billy hesitated, the conflict evident on his young face. He wanted to tell his parents the truth, but the fear he'd felt in Mark's presence made him doubt. I'm not sure," he finally said, his voice trembling slightly. Robert knelt beside Susan, his gentle eyes fixed on Billy. "Son, if you know something, it's important that you tell us. We're here to protect you, okay?" Billy felt tears forming in his eyes. What if he wants to hurt her?" he whispered. A heavy silence followed. Susan and Robert exchanged worried glances, the gravity of the situation becoming clear. "Billy," Susan said softly, "are you talking about the woman you helped this morning? Jessica?" Billy nodded, tears now freely rolling down his cheeks. "He looked so angry, and she seemed so scared when I saw her." Robert embraced his son, his voice firm but gentle. "You did well not to tell him, Billy. Tomorrow, we'll try to find Jessica and understand better what's going on. For now, let's keep this between us, okay?" Billy agreed, feeling both relieved to have told his parents the truth and terrified by the situation they now faced. That night, as the Parker family tried to sleep, the atmosphere in the house was thick with apprehension. Billy, curled under his covers, couldn't shake the image of Mark's cold stare. He only hoped Jessica was safe wherever she was. Outside, unbeknownst to them, a dark car was parked on the street, its occupant silently watching the Parker household. The unexpected visit was only the beginning of something much bigger that was about to unfold. The sun had barely risen when the Parker family left their home. The cold morning air made Billy shiver, but it wasn't just the chill that made him uneasy. The memory of Mark's visit the previous night still hovered over them like a dark cloud. Susan adjusted Billy's scarf, her eyes revealing a mix of worry and determination. "Remember, sweetheart, we have to be discreet. We don't want to draw unnecessary attention." Robert nodded, his hand steady on the car's steering wheel. "We'll start at the park where you saw Jessica the first time, Billy. Then we can check a few local shelters." As the car slipped through the quiet morning streets, Billy felt the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. It was he who had met Jessica, he who had lied to Mark. Now it was he who needed to help find her. The park was deserted when they arrived. The bench where Jessica used to sit was empty, the wood damp with morning dew. Billy felt his heart sink. "She's not here," he murmured. his voice trembling slightly. Susan placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Ois, don't worry, honey. That doesn't mean we won't find her." Robert frowned, his eyes scanning the park. "Let's check the surrounding area. Maybe she found another place to stay." The next few hours were a mixture of hope and disappointment. They walked the nearby streets, discreetly asking in cafes and shops if anyone had seen a pregnant woman alone. Each negative answer weighed more heavily on Billy's heart. When they reached the first shelter, Billy noticed the tension on his parents' faces. Susan and Robert exchanged worried looks before going inside, leaving Billy in the car with strict instructions not to leave. Through the car window, Billy watched the shelter's entrance, counting the minutes. His mind raced with possibilities. What if Jessica was inside? What if Mark had already found her? When his parents finally emerged, the expressions on their faces told the story before they even spoke. No sign of Jessica. The day dragged on, and with each shelter visited, each street searched, hope diminished. Billy could feel the frustration growing in his parents. Small irritated comments, tense glances, exasperated sighs. The search was putting pressure on them all. "Maybe we should stop for today," Susan suggested, after yet another fruitless search. "We're all tired, and Billy needs to eat something." Robert shook his head, his voice tense. "We can't give up now." "What if Mark finds her first?" "What if we never find her?" Susan retorted, her voice rising slightly. "We can't turn the whole city upside down." Billy watched his parents argue with a knot in his stomach. He had never seen them fight like this before. The guilt consumed him. So if only he hadn't given Jessica his money. If only he hadn't lied to Mark. "It's my fault," he murmured, tears forming in his eyes. The ensuing silence was deafening. Susan and Robert immediately stopped, turning their attention to their son. "Oh, Billy." Susan knelt beside him, pulling him into a tight hug. "None of this is your fault, sweetie. You did something wonderful by helping Jessica." Robert joined them, his big, comforting hand on Billy's shoulder. "Your mother's right, champ. We're proud of you. It's because of your kindness that we're trying to help Jessica now." Their words calmed Billy's heart a bit, but the worry persisted. "But what if we never find her?" Robert and Susan exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Susan spoke softly, her voice determined. "We won't give up, Billy, I promise. But your mum is right. We need to rest a bit. Tomorrow, we'll think of new ways to search." Billy nodded, wiping his tears. As they returned to the car, he noticed his parents holding hands, a silent gesture of mutual support. Despite the day's tension, they were still together. On their way back home, they passed the park again. Billy looked instinctively at the empty bench, his heart skipping a beat when he noticed something. "Stop the car!" he suddenly shouted, causing Robert to brake sharply. Before his parents could react, Billy jumped out of the car, running toward the bench. There, half hidden under the seat, was a small scarf, the same one Jessica had worn when he first saw her. "It's hers," Billy exclaimed, holding the scarf as if it were a precious treasure. "She's been here." Susan and Robert hurried over, examining the scarf. "Are you sure, Billy?" Robert asked, his voice a mixture of hope and caution. Billy nodded vigorously. "I'm absolutely sure. She must have come back here at some point." Susan looked around, her eyes scanning the park with renewed interest. "That means she's still in the area. Maybe we were searching in the wrong places all day." The discovery of the scarf injected new energy into the family. They spent the next hour combing the park and nearby streets, this time with sharper eyes, looking for any sign of Jessica. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues, the Parkers finally decided to head home. Though they hadn't found Jessica, the scarf was proof she was still around. It was a small victory, a thread of hope to hold on to. Back at the house, while Billy showered, Susan and Robert talked quietly in the kitchen. "I'm sorry for losing my temper today," Robert murmured, hugging his wife. Susan shook her head, leaning into him. "I'm sorry too. This situation, it's more stressful than we imagined. But we're in this together," Robert affirmed, kissing Susan's forehead gently, "for Billy and for Jessica." Upstairs, wrapped in a towel, Billy looked out his bedroom window. Somewhere out there, Jessica was alone, possibly afraid, possibly. He made a silent promise to himself and to her. He wouldn't give up until he found her. Jessica's scarf, now carefully folded on his bedside table, was a constant reminder of his mission. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new chance to find her, and this time, Billy was determined not to fail. As night fell over the city, the Parker family prepared to sleep, their hearts filled with a mixture of apprehension and hope. No one knew what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. They would face it together, united by an act of kindness that had changed their lives forever. The third day of searching dawned cloudy, mirroring the mood of the Parker family. Billy had barely slept, his dreams filled with images of Jessica alone and frightened. His parents also showed signs of fatigue, dark circles under their eyes contrasting with their unwavering determination. "Last shelter on the list," Robert muttered, parking the car in front of a worn-down building. "Hope House for Women." Susan adjusted Billy's scarf, her eyes full of worry and hope. "Remember, sweetheart, if we see her, we must be gentle and careful. She might be very scared." Billy nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation. Something told him today would be different. The interior of the shelter was simple but welcoming. A middle-aged woman greeted them with a tired smile. "Can I help you?" Robert began explaining their search, keeping the details vague for caution's sake. The woman listened attentively, her eyes narrowing slightly. That's when Billy saw her. At the back of the hall, partially hidden behind a column, stood Jessica. Her eyes, wide with fear, met Billy's for a brief moment before she turned, clearly ready to run. "There!" Billy shouted, pointing. "It's her!" Everything happened in an instant. Jessica ran toward a side door, while the Parker family and the shelter staff moved quickly in her direction. "Jessica, wait!" Susan called, her voice gentle but urgent. "We don't want to hurt you." Jessica stopped abruptly, her hand on the doorknob, her body visibly trembling. Slowly, she turned, tears streaming down her pale face. How did you find me?" she whispered, her voice broken by fear. Billy took a step forward, ignoring his parents' whispered protests. "Jessica, it's me, Billy. Remember, I gave you my piggy bank money." Recognition flickered in Jessica's eyes, mixed with confusion and a spark of hope. "Billy, but why?" Susan approached slowly, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Jessica, we're here to help. A man named Mark came to our house looking for you. We got worried." At the sound of Mark's name, Jessica paled even more, her body shrinking as if she'd been struck. He found you. Oh God, it's not safe for you to be here. You must leave." Robert stepped forward, his voice calm and firm. "Jessica, we're not going anywhere until we know you're safe. Please, can we talk?" The shelter worker, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "There's a private room where you can talk. Jessica, do you want me to stay with you?" Jessica hesitated, her eyes roaming over the faces of the Parker family. Something in their kind looks and genuine concern seemed to calm her slightly. "No, it's okay. I think I can trust them." In a small room, Jessica sat down, her hands protectively over her swollen belly. Billy noticed how much more tired and frightened she looked than when he first met her. "Mark," Jessica began, her voice trembling, "is my ex-fiancé. He's not a good man. I ran away because I feared for my life and my baby's life." Susan sat beside Jessica, offering her a tissue. "Can you tell us more? We want to help, but we need to understand the situation." The words poured out of Jessica like a broken dam. She told them about the abusive relationship, the threats, the constant fear, how she discovered she was pregnant and realized she had to flee to protect her child. "I thought I'd be safe here," she sobbed. "But if he found you, that means he's close. I can't stay. I can't risk him finding me." Robert and Susan exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. Billy spoke first, his small voice determined. "You can stay at our house," he said, surprising everyone. "We have a guest room. Mark won't look for you there." "Billy," Susan began, but stopped when she saw the resolute expression on her son's face. Robert cleared his throat, considering the idea. "Actually, that might not be a bad idea. At least temporarily, until we figure out something more permanent. Jessica looked at them, eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. I can't accept. I already put you in danger just by knowing me. Susan took Jessica's hand gently. Jessica, we can't just ignore your situation. If we can help, even if it's just offering a safe place for a few days, we want to do it. Fresh tears welled in Jessica's eyes. Why? You don't even know me. Billy approached, his small hand touching Jessica's arm. Because it's the right thing to do, and because now you're our friend. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Jessica looked at each of them, seeing only sincerity and concern in their faces. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. If you're sure, I accept. Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you enough. The next few minutes were a flurry of activity. The shelter worker was informed of the plan, promises of discretion were made, and Jessica's few belongings were quickly gathered. As they headed to the car, Billy noticed how Jessica seemed both relieved and apprehensive. He took her hand, offering a small, reassuring smile. It's going to be all right, he said with the certainty that only a child can have. I will protect you. Jessica squeezed Billy's hand, a weak but genuine smile lighting her face for the first time. Thank you, Billy. You're truly an angel. As the car left the shelter's parking lot, the Parker family felt the weight of the responsibility they had taken on. But there was also a sense of purpose, of doing something truly important. What began with a simple act of kindness from a boy had grown into something much larger. Now, they were a temporary refuge for a desperate woman in search of safety and hope. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, they would face whatever came next. Night fell over the Parker home, enveloping it in a tense quiet. Jessica settled into the guest room, her few possessions neatly arranged on the dresser. Dinner had been a quiet meal, punctuated by worried glances and unspoken questions. Now, gathered in the living room, the Parker family and Jessica prepared for a conversation they all knew was necessary, but no one looked forward to starting. Susan was the first to break the silence, her voice gentle but firm. Jessica, we know this must be hard, but we need to understand your situation better so we can help. Jessica nodded, her hands unconsciously caressing her prominent belly. She took a deep breath as if gathering courage and then began to speak. I haven't always lived on the streets, she began, her voice low but clear. In fact, I come from a very wealthy family, the Thorntons. Maybe you've heard of them. Robert frowned, recognizing the name. Thornton? As in Thornton Industries? Jessica nodded, a sad smile on her lips. Exactly. My father is the CEO. I grew up in a mansion, went to the best schools, had everything money could buy. But money doesn't buy happiness or safety, as I found out. She paused, her eyes distant with memories. I met Mark at a gala event. He was charming, sophisticated, everything a rich girl could want. We fell in love quickly, or at least that's what I thought at the time. Billy listened attentively, his eyes wide. It was hard for him to imagine Jessica, whom he met sleeping on a park bench, once living in a mansion. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect, Jessica continued. Mark was attentive, romantic. My parents adored him, saw him as the ideal future son-in-law. We got engaged after 6 months. Her expression darkened. That's when things started to change. At first, small things, belittling comments, excessive jealousy, but soon it turned into something more sinister. Jessica took a deep breath, tears filling her eyes. Mark began to control every aspect of my life. Who I saw, what I wore, even what I ate. If I displeased him in any way, he became violent. Susan covered her mouth with her hand, horrified. Robert clenched his fists, his expression a mix of anger and compassion. Why didn't you tell your parents? Billy asked innocently. Jessica gave him a sad smile. I tried, Billy, but Mark had become an integral part of the family business. My father didn't believe me, thought I was exaggerating. Mark was so charming in public, so respected. She paused, gathering strength to continue. That's when I found out I was pregnant. The same day, I accidentally found documents in Mark's office. Documents proving he was involved in massive fraud, using my family's company as a front for money laundering. Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. Do you still have those proofs? Jessica nodded, pulling a small flash drive from a hidden pocket in her coat. It's all here. Emails, bank transfers, threats to people who knew too much. Mark doesn't know I have this, and that's why he's so desperate to find me. That's why you ran, Susan concluded softly. Yes, Jessica confirmed. I realized I wasn't safe. Mark had already threatened that if I tried to leave him, he'd destroy me. With the baby on the way, I knew I had to protect my child at all costs. Billy, who had remained quiet, absorbing everything, suddenly spoke. Is that why you looked so scared when I saw you in the park? Jessica looked at Billy, surprised. You remember that? Billy nodded enthusiastically. Yes, you were sleeping on the bench, but you looked like you were having a nightmare. When you woke up, you looked around like you were looking for someone. You're very observant, Billy. Jessica smiled, genuinely impressed. Yes, I was constantly afraid Mark would find me. I still am, to be honest. But why didn't you go to the police with these proofs? Robert asked, pointing to the flash drive. Jessica shook her head, her face a mask of defeat. Mark has connections everywhere. Police, judiciary, media. He'd know immediately if I tried something, and besides, she hesitated. The evidence also implicates my father. He may not have been the mastermind, but he definitely benefited from Mark's illegal activities. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone realized the magnitude of Jessica's situation. Is that why you accepted my help that day? Billy asked quietly, breaking the silence. Because you were desperate. Jessica looked at the boy, tears filling her eyes again. So, to Billy, your kindness that day, you have no idea what it meant to me. I was at my lowest point, no money, hungry, scared. Your gesture gave me hope when I needed it most. Billy smiled, feeling both proud and sad. I wish I could have done more. You did more than you know, Jessica assured him. If not for you, I'd probably still be on the streets, or worse. Susan stood up, going to Jessica and wrapping her in a gentle hug. You're safe now. We'll help you figure this out. Robert nodded, determination in his voice. We have to think carefully about our next steps. These proofs are crucial, but we must use them in the right way. Jessica looked at the Parker family, gratitude and hope shining in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You barely know me and are risking so much. It's the right thing to do, Billy said simply, echoing the words he had said at the shelter. As the night wore on, plans began to form. The Parker family knew they were getting involved in something far bigger and more dangerous than they ever imagined. But looking at Jessica and the new life she carried, they knew they couldn't do otherwise. What started with a simple act of kindness had turned into a mission to protect a life and expose the truth. The secrets were out, and now it was time to act. The road ahead would be hard and dangerous, but together they would face whatever came. As everyone prepared to sleep that night, a new determination filled the air. The battle for Jessica's safety and justice was just beginning. But with the Parker family by her side, for the first time in a long while, she felt she had a real chance at a better future. The sun had barely risen when the Parker family gathered in the kitchen, cups of steaming coffee in their hands and determined expressions on their faces. Jessica, with dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night, joined them, nervously cradling her belly. Robert was the first to speak, his voice low but firm. We need a plan. We can't just hide Jessica here forever. Susan nodded, holding Jessica's hand in a comforting gesture. Agreed. We need to think about how to use the evidence we have to expose Mark safely. What about the police? Billy asked, his big eyes filled with worry. Jessica shook her head. Too risky. Like I said, Mark has connections. We don't know who we can trust? Robert scratched his chin, thinking, I have a friend, David Thompson. He's a lawyer with experience in corporate fraud cases. Maybe he can advise us on how to proceed legally. Do you trust him? Jessica asked, her voice apprehensive. With my life, Robert answered without hesitation. He has no connections to Thornton Industries or any of Mark's circles. I think he's our best bet. After a brief discussion, they all agreed to contact David. Robert made the call, speaking in code that only he and David understood, arranging a meeting for that afternoon in a neutral location. Meanwhile, Susan and Jessica worked out a plan to keep Jessica hidden. They decided she would stay in the basement, which had an emergency exit to the backyard. They organized supplies, created a communication system, and established escape routes in case the worst happened. Billy watched everything with a mixture of fascination and worry. He desperately wanted to help, but felt powerless in the face of such complexity. Then he had an idea. While the adults were busy, Billy quietly took the family's tablet and began researching Mark and Thornton Industries. He thought that if he could find more information, he could help even more. What Billy didn't realize was that his online searches left digital traces. Traces that, unfortunately, would not go unnoticed for long. That afternoon, Robert left to meet David, leaving Susan at home with Jessica and Billy. The lawyer listened attentively to the story, examining the evidence on the flash drive with growing concern. "This is big, Robert," David said gravely. "We're talking about massive fraud, money laundering, and possibly even connections to organized crime. We'll have to be extremely careful." They spent the next few hours outlining a legal strategy, planning how to present the evidence to the proper authorities without alerting Mark or his allies. Meanwhile, at home, tension was palpable. Susan tried to keep Jessica calm, talking about the baby and future plans. Billy, feeling guilty about his secret research, paced around, glancing nervously at the tablet. It was during one of these checks that Billy saw something that made his blood run cold. A post on a local social network mentioned a well-dressed man asking questions about a pregnant woman in a nearby neighborhood. "Mom!" Billy shouted, running into the kitchen. "I think Mark is looking for Jessica nearby." Susan and Jessica turned pale. "How do you know this, Billy?" Susan asked, taking the tablet. Embarrassed, Billy confessed about his secret searches. "I just wanted to help," he mumbled, tears forming in his eyes. "Oh, Billy," Susan sighed, torn between worry and understanding. "I know you meant well, but this could have put us in danger." Jessica, trembling visibly, wrapped her arms around her belly. "He's getting closer. I knew this would happen. I need to leave. I can't put you at risk." "No," Susan said firmly. "We won't let you face this alone. We'll wait for Robert to come back, then decide what to do." The following hours tested everyone's nerves. Every sound outside made them jump. Billy, consumed by guilt, stood guard at the front window, determined to sound the alarm if he saw Mark. When Robert finally returned, the relief was momentary. His tense face told a story before he even spoke. "Josh, David thinks we have a solid case," he said, "but we have to act fast. He's preparing documents to present to federal authorities tomorrow." "It may be too late," Susan said, showing Robert the post Billy had found. Robert's face hardened. "This complicates things. We need to get Jessica out of here tonight." David suggested a safe shelter run by an NGO he trusts. "They can protect her until we present the evidence." Jessica, pale but determined, nodded. "It's the best option. I can't risk Mark finding me here, or worse, hurting you." As they made the final preparations for Jessica's departure, Billy approached her, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to make things harder." Jessica knelt down, embracing the boy. "Oh, Billy, you didn't make things harder. In fact, your discovery might have saved us. You're my little hero, remember?" Jessica's words soothed Billy's heart somewhat, but the tension in the air was palpable. As night fell, the Parker family prepared for a dangerous journey, knowing the next 24 hours would be crucial, not only for Jessica's safety, but also for exposing the truth and seeking justice. The plan was in motion, but danger had never been closer. The race against time and against Mark had begun, and no one knew how it would end. Night fell over the city, enveloping the Parker home in restless shadows. Preparations for moving Jessica to the safe shelter were nearly complete. Bags were packed, routes planned, and tension hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Jessica sat in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she held a cup of tea. Susan was beside her, offering words of comfort, when suddenly Jessica gasped, the cup slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. "Jessica, what's wrong?" Susan asked, alarmed. Jessica grabbed her belly, her eyes wide with fear and surprise. I think the baby is coming, she whispered, her voice trembling. Panic set in quickly. Robert rushed into the kitchen at the sound of breaking glass, finding Jessica doubled over in pain and Susan trying to calm her. "But it's too early," Billy exclaimed, appearing at the kitchen door, his face pale with worry. "The stress," Susan murmured, helping Jessica stand. "It must have sped things up." "Robert, we need to get her to the hospital now." The calm Robert had maintained in recent hours began to unravel. "But what about Mark? If we go to the hospital, he might find us." "We have no choice," Susan replied firmly. "Jessica and the baby need medical care. We'll have to risk it." The next minutes were a whirlwind of activity. Robert helped Jessica into the car, while Susan hastily gathered the necessary documents and a bag of essentials. Billy, determined to help, ran to get Jessica's favorite blanket she had brought from the shelter. The ride to the hospital was tense. Jessica moaned in pain with each contraction, her ragged breathing filling the silence of the car. Billy, sitting in the back seat next to her, held her hand, whispering words of encouragement he'd heard in movies. "It'll be all right, Jessica," he said, his small voice firm. "You're strong. The baby will be fine." Arriving at the hospital, Robert ran to get help while Susan and Billy helped Jessica out of the car. A medical team quickly arrived with a wheelchair, taking Jessica to the maternity ward. On the way to the delivery room, Jessica grabbed Susan's arm. "Please," she gasped between contractions, "don't leave me alone." Susan looked at Robert, a silent conversation passing between them. "Go with her," Robert said. "I'll stay here with Billy." As Jessica was taken into the delivery room, Billy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, what if Mark shows up?" Robert knelt down, his hands on Billy's shoulders. "If that happens, we'll deal with it. But right now, our priority is Jessica and the baby. Understand?" Billy nodded, determination shining in his young eyes. The following hours were an emotional roller coaster. Jessica's screams echoed down the corridor, making Billy cringe each time. Robert paced back and forth, obsessively checking the hospital's entrances. Inside the delivery room, Susan held Jessica's hand, offering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Jessica. Breathe. Your baby is almost here." Jessica, covered in sweat and exhausted, looked at Susan with eyes full of fear and gratitude. "What if something goes wrong? What if Mark—" "Don't think about that now," Susan gently interrupted. "Focus on your baby. She needs you strong." The contractions intensified, and soon the room was filled with urgent activity. Doctors and nurses worked in sync, their voices calm but urgent. "Now, Jessica," the doctor instructed. "Push!" With a scream that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, Jessica gave one last push. The sharp cry of a newborn filled the room, momentarily silencing all chaos. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, lifting the baby so Jessica could see. Tears of joy and relief streamed down Jessica's face as she reached out for her daughter. Susan, also crying, hugged Jessica, overwhelmed by emotion. In the corridor, Robert and Billy heard the baby's cry. Billy jumped up in excitement, a wide smile spreading across his face. "The baby's born, Dad. Can we see her?" Robert, tears in his eyes, nodded. "Yeah, let's wait for them to call us, me son. Give Jessica a moment." Minutes later, which felt like hours to Billy, Susan emerged from the delivery room, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "You can come in now. She's a beautiful, healthy baby girl." Billy was the first to enter, his eyes wide with wonder at seeing Jessica holding a tiny bundle in her arms. He approached timidly. "Hi, Billy," Jessica said softly, her voice hoarse but full of love. "Want to meet the baby?" Billy nodded, unable to speak. Jessica adjusted the blanket, revealing the baby's rosy face. "This is Hope," she said, tears of happiness in her eyes, "because she gave me hope when I needed it most." "She's so small," Billy whispered, amazed. Hesitantly, he reached out, and the baby grabbed his finger with surprising strength. Robert joined them, placing an arm around Susan. "She's perfect, Jessica. Congratulations." For a moment, the room was filled with a peace that seemed to banish all outside worries. Hope's arrival brought a light of renewal for everyone, a reminder of what truly mattered. But reality soon intruded again. Robert checked his phone, his expression turning serious. The lawyer called. "He's on his way with the documents. We need to be ready to act as soon as Jessica and the baby are cleared." Jessica held Hope tighter, fear returning to her eyes. "What if Mark finds out we're here?" "We won't let that happen," Susan reassured, her voice determined. "We'll protect you both, no matter what." Billy, still holding Hope's tiny hand, looked up at Jessica with a seriousness beyond his years. "Don't worry, Jessica. We're family now, and families take care of each other." Billy's words brought tears to everyone's eyes. At that moment, despite the danger still lurking outside, there was a sense of unity and shared purpose. As the night wore on, the Parker family took turns staying with Jessica and Hope, always alert for any sign of trouble. Hope's birth had brought a moment of joy and renewal, but it also raised the stakes. Now more than ever, they were determined to protect Jessica and her newborn daughter, no matter the cost. The future was still uncertain, but with Hope's arrival, a new determination united them. The battle for Jessica's safety and justice was far from over, but that night in the small hospital room, there was hope. And sometimes, hope is all you need to face even the scariest challenges. The constant beeping of the heart monitors filled the hospital room, blending with the soft sound of Jessica's breathing as she finally slept after hours of labor. Her newborn daughter, a perfect little girl with dark hair like her mother's, slept peacefully in a nearby bassinet. Robert and Susan Parker sat in uncomfortable chairs beside the bed, exhausted but vigilant. Billy had been taken home by a trusted neighbor, reluctant to leave Jessica, but convinced he needed rest. "She's beautiful," Susan whispered, looking at the baby with tenderness. Robert nodded, a tired smile on his face. "Yes, she is. After all Jessica's been through, it's a miracle." The moment of peace was abruptly interrupted by raised voices in the corridor. Robert stood up immediately, his expression shifting from exhaustion to alertness. "Stay with Jessica," he muttered to Susan, heading toward the door. He had barely reached the handle when the door burst open. Mark, his face a mask of controlled fury, stormed into the room, followed closely by an agitated nurse. "Sir, you can't be in here," the nurse protested, but Mark ignored her completely. "Where is she?" he growled, his eyes sweeping the room until they landed on Jessica's sleeping form. Robert stepped between Mark and the bed, his stance firm and protective. "You're not welcome here, Mark. Leave now." Mark laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Leave? This is my fiancée and my child. I have every right to be here." Susan stood up, positioning herself beside the baby's bassinet. "They're not your property, Mark. Jessica doesn't want you here." As if awakened by the tension in the air, Jessica began to stir, her eyes slowly opening. Upon seeing Mark, she let out a muffled scream of terror, instinctively trying to sit up. "Jessica, my love," Mark said, his voice suddenly soft but with a threatening undertone. "Why did you run away?" "I've been so worried." "Stay away from me," Jessica cried, her face pale with fear. "Don't let him near the baby." Mark took a step forward, but Robert blocked him, pushing him back. "You hurt her. Get out now, or I'll call security." Mark's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. That child is mine, and Jessica will come with me whether you like it or not." Susan, who had discreetly pressed the emergency call button, spoke calmly despite her fear. "The police are on their way. Mark, you should leave now." For a moment, Mark seemed to hesitate, his eyes darting between Jessica, the baby, and the door. Then, with a quick move, he tried to rush past Robert, reaching out toward Jessica. Robert reacted instantly, grabbing Mark and shoving him against the wall. "Don't even think about it," he growled, struggling to restrain the younger, stronger man. The scene devolved into chaos. Jessica screamed. The baby began to cry, and Susan moved to protect the child, placing herself between the bassinet and the fight. Nurses and hospital security guards flooded into the room, pulling Robert and Mark apart. Mark's expensive suit was now rumpled, his expression a mix of rage and frustration as he was restrained. "This isn't over," he spat, glaring directly at Jessica. "You know you can't hide from me. I will get back what's mine." As Mark was dragged out of the room, the distant sound of sirens signaled the police's arrival. Jessica, trembling uncontrollably, hugged her baby, tears streaming down her face. "He'll come back," she whispered, her voice broken by fear. "He always comes back." Robert and Susan exchanged worried looks. Jessica was right. Mark wouldn't give up easily, especially now that he knew where she was. Minutes later, 2 police officers entered the room, notebooks in hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, we'd like to ask some questions about the incident." While Robert explained the situation to the officers, carefully omitting details about Jessica's past and the evidence against Mark, Susan tried to soothe Jessica and the baby. "He ran off before we could detain him," one of the officers said, frowning. "But we've filed a report and will increase patrols in the area. You should consider additional protective measures." After the police left, a heavy silence settled over the room. The reality of the situation hit them hard. They weren't just hiding Jessica. Now they were actively protecting her and a newborn from a dangerous, powerful man. "We can't do this alone," Robert finally said, running a hand over his tired face. "We need professional help." Susan nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "Maybe we should contact an organization that helps abuse victims. They must have resources and experience dealing with situations like this." Jessica, still cradling her baby, looked at the Parkers with eyes full of gratitude and fear. "I'm sorry for involving you in all this. You've done so much for me already." "Don't even think that," Susan said firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed and holding Jessica's hand. "We're in this together now. We won't let you face this alone." Robert picked up his phone, determination on his face. "I'll call David. He should know someone who can help us with professional security. We also need to hurry and present that evidence against Mark. The sooner he's arrested, the safer we'll all be." While Robert made the calls, Susan helped Jessica get more comfortable, ensuring that she and the baby were at ease. The fear was still in Jessica's eyes, but there was also a spark of hope. "Thank you," Jessica whispered, looking at Susan and Robert.
"I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here," Susan smiled softly, stroking Jessica's hair. "That's what family is for, and whether you like it or not, you're part of our family now." Susan's words brought tears to Jessica's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. For the first time in a long, she didn't feel alone.
The confrontation at the hospital had made it clear just how dangerous the situation was, but it had also solidified their determination. They would face whatever came their way, together as a family. As night fell over the hospital, plans were made, security measures were discussed, and a new resolve took shape. The battle was far from over, but now they were better prepared than ever to face it. The hospital was quiet, the silence of the early morning broken only by the occasional soft footstep of nurses making their rounds. In Jessica's room, tension was palpable. Robert and Susan Parker took turns keeping watch, while Jessica slept fitfully. Her newborn daughter nestled beside her. A gentle knock on the door made Robert stand up abruptly, on alert. He exchanged a worried glance with Susan before approaching cautiously. "Who is it?" he asked softly. "Detective Michael Reeves," came the reply. "I'm here to talk to Jessica Thornton." Robert opened the door slowly, revealing a middle-aged man in a worn trench coat with keen eyes. The detective flashed his ID, his gaze scanning the room quickly. "How did you find us?" Susan asked, stepping protectively closer to Jessica's bed. "I'm good at my job," Reeves replied simply. Noting the tension in the air, he softened his tone. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Actually, I'm here to help." Movement on the bed indicated Jessica was awake. Her eyes widened at the stranger, instinctively pulling her baby closer. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. Reeves took a step forward, but maintained a respectful distance. "Miss Thornton, I was hired by your parents almost 2 years ago. They've been searching for you tirelessly since you disappeared." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Jessica paled, her hands gripping the blanket. "My parents? But they didn't care, they didn't believe me about Mark." The detective sighed, pulling up a chair to sit. "Things changed a lot after you left, Miss Thornton. Your parents realized their mistake in trusting Mark. They discovered some of his suspicious activities and started investigating on their own." Robert and Susan were surprised, but stayed silent, letting the detective continue. When they learned the truth about Mark and realized you'd run away to protect yourself, they were devastated, Reeves continued. They've spent the last 2 years trying to right their wrongs and find you. Jessica looked stunned, conflicting emotions crossing her face. But why didn't they go to the police? For the same reason you didn't, Reeves explained gently. Mark has powerful connections. Your parents feared an official investigation would put you in even greater danger. A heavy silence fell over the room as Jessica processed the information. Susan approached, placing a reassuring hand on Jessica's shoulder. What does this mean now? Robert asked cautiously. What do her parents want? Reeves sat up straighter. They want to help. They want to protect Jessica and their granddaughter, and they want to see Mark pay for his crimes. And I have a plan to make that happen. Jessica looked at the detective, a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. What kind of plan? One that uses the evidence you collected, combined with the investigation your parents and I conducted over the past 2 years, Reeves explained. We have enough to bring down not just Mark, but the entire criminal network he's involved with. Robert frowned. Why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't some kind of trap? Reeves smiled slightly, appreciating Robert's caution. He pulled an envelope from his coat's inner pocket and handed it to Jessica. This should prove my intentions. With trembling hands, Jessica opened the envelope. Inside were photos of her parents, looking much older and more tired than she remembered, holding signs with messages of love and regret. Tears began streaming down Jessica's cheeks as she examined the images. They really care, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Reeves nodded solemnly. They made mistakes, but they're desperate to fix them. And now with their granddaughter, there's even more at stake. Jessica looked at her baby, then at the Parkers, and finally back at Reeves. What's your plan? The detective leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Joyce, we'll use the proofs you have, along with what we've gathered, to build an irrefutable case. But instead of going directly to the authorities, we'll release it all to the media simultaneously. That will make it impossible for Mark or his allies to cover it up. What about Jessica's and the baby's safety? Susan asked, worried. Already being arranged, Reeves assured. Your parents hired an elite security team. As soon as Jessica agrees, they'll be here to escort her to a safe location. Jessica was silent for a long moment, absorbing everything. Finally, she looked at the Parkers, her eyes full of gratitude. You've done so much for me. What do you think? Robert and Susan exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. Susan spoke. I think this might be our best chance to ensure your safety and get justice from Jessica, but the final decision is yours. Jessica took a deep breath, looking at her baby and then back at Reeves. With a newfound determination in her voice, she said, Let's do it. It's time to end this once and for all. Reeves nodded, a satisfied smile on his face. Excellent. Let's start immediately. As the detective began outlining the next steps, a feeling of hope filled the room. For the first time in a long time, Jessica's nightmare seemed close to its end. With unexpected allies and a concrete plan, they were ready to face Mark and seek the justice so long overdue. The sun had barely risen when Jessica's hospital room turned into an improvised operations center. Detective Reeves, the Parkers, and an elite security team gathered around the bed, reviewing the final details of the plan that could change everything. All right, let's recap, Reeves said, his voice low and steady. Our sources confirm that Mark is on his way to the hospital. He probably found out Jessica gave birth and thinks this is his chance to catch her off guard. Robert nodded, his face tense. And we're going to use that against him. Exactly, Reeves confirmed. The media team is positioned and ready to release the evidence as soon as we give the signal. The authorities are on alert, ready to act at the right moment. Jessica, holding her baby close, looked at everyone with a mixture of fear and determination. What about my parents? They're safe at an undisclosed location, Reeves assured. They'll come once Mark is detained and the situation is under control. Susan, who was helping Jessica get ready, voiced the question weighing on her mind. What about Billy? Are we sure it's safe to involve him in this? All eyes turned to Billy, now 9 years old, sitting quietly in the corner of the room. Billy looked up, courage shining in his big eyes. "I want to help," he said, his voice small but firm. "Jessica and the baby are family now." Reeves knelt down in front of Billy, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Billy, what you're about to do is very important and potentially dangerous. Do you understand that?" Billy nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir. I'll be careful, I promise." Jessica beckoned Billy closer. As he approached, she hugged him with one arm. "Oh, Billy, you've already done so much for me. Are you sure about this?" "Yes," Billy replied, a small, determined smile on his face. "It's the right thing to do." The moment was interrupted by Reeves' phone ringing. After a brief conversation, he turned to the group, his expression serious. "Mark just entered the hospital parking lot. It's time to act." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The security team took their positions, some outside the room, others posted strategically around the hospital to ensure Jessica and the baby's safety. Robert and Susan hugged Billy tightly. "Remember, son," Robert whispered. "At the first sign of real danger, you get out of there. Promise." "I promise, Dad," Billy answered, his voice trembling slightly. With one last look at his parents and Jessica, Billy left the room with Reeves, his small body carrying the weight of enormous responsibility. The next minutes were nearly unbearable. Jessica, now hidden in a secure room with Susan and part of the security team, cradled her baby, murmuring soothing words to calm them both. In the hospital lobby, Billy was strategically placed, pretending to play with a toy car. His eyes, however, were alert, watching every movement around him. The sound of hurried footsteps made Billy's heart pound. Mark stepped into the hospital, his face a mask of cold determination. Following the plan, Billy accidentally rolled his toy car toward Mark's feet. "Oops, sorry, sir," Billy exclaimed, his voice innocent and clear. Mark stopped, visibly annoyed by the interruption. He looked at Billy, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Hey, I know you. You're the kid from that house where Jessica was." Billy feigned surprise. "Jessica, the pregnant lady. She was here, but I heard a nurse say she left early this morning." The information made Mark frown. Left? Where? At that critical moment, Billy saw Reeves and the team silently moving into position from the corner of his eye. He knew he had to keep Mark distracted just a few seconds more. "I'm not sure," Billy said, pretending to think, "but I saw a big car waiting outside earlier. Maybe she left in that—" Mark cursed under his breath, turning quickly toward the exit. That's when Reeves gave the signal. "Mark Thompson," Reeves's voice thundered through the lobby. "You're surrounded. Don't make any sudden moves." Chaos erupted in seconds. Realizing he was cornered, Mark made a desperate move toward Billy, probably thinking of using him as a shield. But Billy, prepared for this, rolled aside, allowing the security team to quickly immobilize Mark. As Mark was handcuffed, shouting threats and denials, the TVs in the hospital lobby suddenly switched to a breaking news broadcast. The evidence against Mark, along with details of his crimes, was being aired nationwide. "This is nonsense!" Mark screamed as he was dragged outside. "You have no idea how powerful I am. This won't end here." But his threats sounded hollow in the face of the overwhelming evidence now publicly revealed. Incriminating emails, suspicious bank records, even audio recordings of Mark threatening business partners were all displayed for the entire country to see. Billy watched, fascinated and a bit scared, and as Mark was taken away, Reeves approached, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "You were incredible, Billy. Thanks to you, we got him." Upstairs, upon hearing that the operation had been successful, Jessica finally allowed tears of relief to fall. Susan hugged her, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "It's over," Jessica whispered, almost not believing it. "It's really over." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Officials arrived to take statements. The media surrounded the hospital seeking more details, and in the midst of it all, Jessica's parents finally arrived. The reunion was emotional. Years of misunderstandings and regret were expressed in tight embraces and tearful apologies. Jessica introduced her daughter to her grandparents for the first time, a moment of pure joy in the midst of chaos. "Forgive us, dear," Jessica's mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "We should have believed you from the start." "We're here now," Jessica's father added, his voice thick with emotion. "Feist will spend the rest of our lives making it right." As the Thornton family reconnected, the Parkers watched from a distance, their hearts filled with a mix of happiness and a touch of sadness. Billy, exhausted but satisfied, snuggled between his parents. "Do you think Jessica will still be our friend?" he asked softly. Susan smiled, hugging her son. "I'm sure of it, sweetheart. Some friendships are for life." As if hearing her words, Jessica turned to the Parkers, her eyes shining with gratitude. She walked over, baby in her arms and parents right behind. "I don't even know how to begin to thank you all," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You not only saved our lives, but gave me back my family. I'll never forget what you've done for us." Robert smiled, placing a hand on Billy's shoulder. It was this little hero here who started it all. His act of kindness set everything in motion. Billy blushed, but his chest swelled with pride. Jessica knelt down, meeting Billy's eyes. "Billy, you're the angel I didn't know I needed. Thank you for everything." As the two families embraced, sharing hugs and promises to keep in touch, there was a palpable sense that a dark chapter had closed, and a new one, full of hope and possibility, had just begun. Outside, the sun shone brighter, as if celebrating the victory of truth and justice. The final plan had been a success, not only in capturing Mark and exposing his crimes, but in reuniting a family and forging bonds that would last a lifetime. And at the center of it all was Billy, the boy whose innocent compassion had changed so many lives forever. A year had passed since the tumultuous events at the hospital. The Thornton family's garden was decorated with colorful balloons and streamers, a big banner strung between two trees reading, "Happy First Birthday, Hope." Jessica, with a radiant smile, held her daughter in her arms as she greeted guests. Her parents, Elizabeth and George Thornton, stood beside her, their faces reflecting a mix of joy and gratitude. "Joyce, who would have thought we'd be here today, all together?" Elizabeth said, eyes misty. "There was a time I thought I'd never see my daughter again." George gently squeezed his wife's shoulder. "But we are here, and we have so much to celebrate." The last year had been one of healing and rebuilding for the Thornton family. After Mark's arrest and the exposure of his crimes, Jessica finally told her parents the full story. The following weeks were filled with tears, apologies, and gradually, forgiveness. "Daughter," George had said on a particularly emotional night, "we may never fully forgive ourselves for not believing you, but I promise we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to make it right." Jessica, cradling hope, had replied with a trembling smile, "What matters is that we're together now. Hope deserves to know her grandparents, and I missed you both." The sound of a car arriving brought Jessica back to the present, her face lit up seeing the Parker family step out of the vehicle. "So they came," Hope cooed happily in her mother's arms, as if sensing Jessica's excitement. Billy, now 9 years old, ran toward them, his face glowing with excitement. "Jessica! Hope!" he shouted, hugging them both tightly. Robert and Susan followed more calmly, warm smiles on their faces. "Sorry we're late," Susan said, handing over a carefully wrapped gift. "Found someone was too excited to leave and we almost forgot the present." Billy blushed, but his smile never faded. "I made a special card for Hope," he announced proudly. The party unfolded in an atmosphere of joy and gratitude. Friends and family mingled, sharing stories and laughter. In a quiet moment, Jessica pulled the Parkers aside to a more secluded corner of the garden. "I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you did for me and Hope," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save our lives, you gave me back my family." Susan hugged Jessica tightly. "You're part of our family too now, dear. We're so happy to see how well things turned out." Robert nodded, a warm smile on his face. "It's amazing how it all started, with a simple act of kindness from Billy." Hearing his name, Billy looked up from where he was playing with Hope. "What?" Jessica knelt down to Billy's level. "We were just remembering how it all began. My little hero. You changed so many lives with your compassion." Billy looked thoughtful for a moment. "I just did what I thought was right," he said simply. "I didn't know it would change so much. That's how it works, son, Robert explained, ruffling Billy's hair affectionately. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impacts. The party continued, full of touching moments. There were heartfelt toasts, many tears of happiness, and of course the cake moment. With Jessica's help, Hope blew out her first candle, prompting applause and laughter from everyone. As the afternoon wore on, guests began to leave. In the end, only the Thornton and Parker families remained, sitting on the lawn and watching Hope and Billy play. "It's incredible how things have changed in a year," Elizabeth commented, her eyes following her granddaughter's movements. George nodded, holding his wife's hand. "We have much to be thankful for. Not only do we have Jessica and Hope back, but we've gained a new family in the Parkers." Jessica, leaning on her mother's shoulder, smiled softly. "I guess it's true what they say. Family isn't just blood. It's who's there for you in the hardest moments." Susan and Robert exchanged emotional looks. "We couldn't agree more," Susan said. "This last year taught us so much about compassion, forgiveness, and the power of small acts of kindness." Billy, tired of playing, came to sit on his father's lap. "Dad," he asked, yawning, "do you think I can help other people like I helped Jessica when I grow up?" Robert hugged his son, feeling a wave of pride. "I'm sure you can, champ. You have a heart of gold. Just remember, sometimes the simplest gesture can make the biggest difference." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the two families remained there, united by extraordinary circumstances and bound by love and gratitude. Jessica looked around, at her parents, at the Parkers, at Billy gently playing with Hope. Her heart filled with a happiness she once thought she'd never feel again. "A year ago," she said softly, "I was alone, afraid, and without hope. Today, I'm surrounded by love, with a bright future ahead. And it all started with a boy and his piggy bank." Everyone laughed softly, eyes shining with unshed tears. The shadows of the past had been dispelled by the light of compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love. As the night gently fell over the garden, bringing the first stars into the sky, there was a sense that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. A beginning full of promises, second chances, and the certainty that no matter how dark the night might seem, there is always hope for a new dawn. And all because a boy decided to break his piggy bank and help a stranger in need. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of kindness,